Good morning. This is just a short clip to explain the video that you're about to watch. A good friend of mine, Justin Matthews, and I have been discussing, we've been discussing life at great extents for the past 4 years. We first met like 9 years ago. Just a brief cross interaction. We have a very close mutual friend with whom I worked at the organic farm here in town for a great number of years. And then we reconnected early in, I want to say it was like late 2020, early 21. And since then have developed an incredibly close relationship and friendship. And we have a great flow that goes between us that invariably benefits both he and I individually. So we came up with an idea to start a new podcast series with the intention of throwing some of our conversations out there publicly to see if they could affect others in a positive way. With that said, we are still very much in sort of the co-creative, sort of practicing mode for it. We're trying on a title and we're finding our flow. And the video you're about to watch is take one of the podcast series. I will call it practice take one of the podcast series that our title that we're working with is Where to From Here. Where to From Here. Practice recording number one, which is to say, it isn't perfect. It's got some flaws. We're working to find our flows and to tweak some of our weaknesses and to really hone this in. But if you happen to be like me, I'm kind of a sucker for the behind the scenes of a creative process. I kind of would love the opportunity to see something like this rather than just being exposed to sort of the final version. It's probably the artist within me that yearns to see more of that with folks whose work I really admire out in the world. So with that thought, and again, it's not perfect. There are definitely things we're working on tweaking, but we thought that it was a decent conversation. And we believe that we're approaching these times in a way that neither one of us has heard out there in alternative media, individual media, speaking to where we are and where are we going, and most notably, how trying to give voice to how to get there, and then to utilize our own lives and what we're doing in our own lives to demonstrate these things that we're talking about. So with that said, enjoy take one of practice take one of Where to From Here with Justin and Alyson. Oh, okay.
Oh, wow. So how come you can do that on your computer, but I can't do this on my phone? This is just not technology. I swear I'm getting off Android. I'm going to Linux. For the new world, for the new world order, we need new technologies. We also need new perspectives, I think. But one of the things we need technological wise is like an open source something because Android and Samsung and Facebook and Meta and all things technocratic are joining together to stop the expression of free speech and the collective unionization of people everywhere to keep us divided, distracted, and keep them in charge.
You're not going to get any disagreement from me.
So first things first, it's like hello and welcome to fill in the blank, where this blank is what we're going to be talking about as far as what this blank is going to be. What should we call it anyway? Like, what do you think? I'm a fan of like choose love, but it's a little vague.
I'm gonna say that one wouldn't get the flow yet. I
Okay.
I like I like the one that you came up with. Where to from here? I really
Where
like
to from here?
where to
Okay.
from here. And I know your issue is that you feel that's a little too passive for Justin's, a little too passive for your preference, but I feel like it
Brought to you by our sponsors.
kombucha and mine is a polar seltzer. Yeah, no, definitely not sponsors. Wouldn't that be nice? No,
Yet.
I like your idea of where to from here, because I just feel like that is something that would strike anybody on any side of any fence right now. I just feel like that, and I think it applies across any issue in any aspect of society, world, culture we want to look at. I think that that phrase would hit a lot of people, but we're definitely still marinating with it.
Okay, well let's explore that. And so where to from here, I guess. Yeah, and like you said, what the purpose behind that is, because that's really the question. It's like actually the question at the core of my philosophy is because it is self-explanatory in some way to where to from here should be the question. Now, first we need to figure out where here is, obviously. And that seems like everybody's struggling with that right now. So that's what I think, but that's what I see the show being about is first we talk about where here is, like where we're at, like, and we do it in a realistic and rational way without sides, without this bizarre sort of emotional tribalism that's going on right now. Because let's be honest, it really is like there's emotional agendas aplenty. Very rarely are they based on solid fact. Very rarely are they like empirical or objective whatsoever. They're emotional agendas. They're designed to continue and perpetuate a feeling that's already been decided upon ahead of time. And like I got an engineer at work one time furious with me because he was trying to complain about government. And I was like, explain it to me the way you'd explain changing the tire in your car, and he just couldn't do it because it was an emotional agenda and it was a form of tribalism where we're just cheering our team and we're poo-booing the other guys. And all we want is we want the ref to call it our way each time, every time. And it's just silly. It's childish and it's silly. And it's not doing anything but keeping the powerful in charge.
Yeah, and I think that in terms of bridge building in a way, like really trying to paint a metaphorical picture of building a bridge, where to from here. So yes,
Mm,
an honest, as much as we can, unbiased, although obviously we're human beings, we're going to have our biases. But I think when we speak about things, you and I have a good, ability to identify, hey, this is my bias, this is this side, but the ability to then take the stance from the other side and to be able to talk about things without the emotional charge. And then the there part, like where to from here. So that sort of implies that there's a there. So then it's
mm,
sort of beginning to give voice to the there. And that gets a little, well, depending on the perspective, it can get tricky, right? Because you start getting into, if you're really speaking to the greater truths, the multidimensional realities. And
yeah.
so, depending on who, as we talk through this, who we're sort of targeting as an audience, really always wanting to try to reach something. When I put work out, I always have the goal to try to reach as many people as possible. But what I'm learning is there's only a certain, we'll call it a frequency, to kind of try to stay away from hierarchy and levels. There's only a certain level now that I want to bring something down to. But I do find that, I mean, just based on my own, when I had my spiritual awakening, everything changed in terms of, it was like an entire shift of what I was pursuing in this world. So it's a tough thing to speak to. It's easy if people have the awareness that there's more than just this 3D, one earth, one time space dimension. But it gets a little tricky if we're going to try to talk about things when we're speaking to people who may not be as open or aware.
Well, yes, I see what you're saying, of course, because obviously, like it's not going to be for everybody. But then again, you can't really say something for everybody. You
Very
could
much.
say even the most basic thing in the world, and
Yeah,
somebody's going to find fault with it, no matter what.
true.
And what we're going to be talking about is definitely not going to be the most simple thing in the world. So
Yeah.
obviously, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, nor would I want it to be really at the end of the day, because that's boring. Why bother? There's already more than enough of that. And why I wanted the where to from here? Because what there is a lot of, but what there is, it already exists a lot of people like that I really like listening to, like Russell Brand and different characters like that, who they are already doing, like really talking about the here in a real way, like independent media way. So even that block is covered more or less by independent media right now. But the one thing that I don't hear from very often is the there, like, well, and what could it be, what could it look like? And what you're talking about, yeah, reality is infinite, and so is the future, but it still doesn't mean that we can't pick something and imagine a world in which that's true, and then try, and the thing that I don't hear at all is how to get from here to there. Like
Actually,
very rarely will you hear like some sort of vague notion about a there. Well, what would be great is if we had more community building. And but it's just very general. It's very nebulous. It's not really discussed in depth. 99% of what's talked about is like the here. It's either the mainstream media trying to sell you a narrative or the independent media trying to figure out what the fuck's going on. Am I allowed to swear on this?
yes, of course.
Okay. All right,
Absolutely.
cool. All right.
Swearing is welcome.
And sorry as well. Yeah. So like a very little thought's given to the there. And I really would like to flesh out their layer a lot more, but not, and then even take it one more step further, the how to, like and we're just brainstorming at this point, but we might as well. Why not? Because if you don't have a goal, how are you going to have a direction? And then even if you have a goal, you still have to figure out how to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I mean, for many years, I've felt that the missing voices were exactly that. Like there's a lot of general sort of, for lack of a better way of calling it, we'll call kind of a lot of general spiritual talk out there. And
Yeah.
fourth dimension, fifth dimension and beyond, and the awakening and ascension, all these terms. But I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't agree more. I have been sort of aghast, actually, especially in light of the past 3 years. In fact, I could say that that was personally one of the hardest, like, just sort of energetic letdowns, that I didn't even realize I was attached to anything. But I thought, when things got crazy in 2020 and I turned back into individual media, I had tuned out most media, but then when I tuned back in, I found myself being drawn very much to individuals
Yeah.
across the globe who were in essence taking on, they had all gone down particular rabbit holes for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So everybody had kind of had their shtick and their story of how they were seeing what was going on. But it was so individual. Clearly they weren't bought and owned and paid for. it was
Yeah.
it was tuning in to actual human beings just like me, trying to do their best with where they were on their journey, with both the
Yeah.
here and with both, in some instances, in many instances, people of more spiritual natures that had imaginations of the there, like you and I have talked about as well. But what I
Yeah.
found shocking when the world started to kind of go more openly insane than it has been, because it's certainly been leading up to this, I thought for certain I would personally start to experience more than just myself and my imagination, and start drawing together with others and actual, like, pockets of projects where we're taking this for a spin, where we're understanding sort of how reality comes into fruition, how vibration and frequency work, and we're taking it for a ride with other people. And so far, my goodness, I cannot believe how little there seems to be. At least I haven't gotten to that frequency yet. So, or I am, and I'm just not close enough to others. I mean, something's happening, because I know I want that. And to some degree, you and I think our relationship in the past 4 years has sort of been that. And I think we've been working our way to something. Actually, this podcast could actually be used as an example of something, at least, that we're finally taking a step to try to take all this energy closer to the there and further from the here.
Well, I would enjoy it, and fundamentally, I would enjoy it because, yeah, talking to you for the last 4 years has just sort of let me know that there's somebody else out there, that I'm not alone, and then I can stop by, I visit you in Sarasota, and just say hello. It's awesome because it's not community. Well, I guess it's a community of two, but it's even that narrow community is still preferable to feeling like you're alone in the world. Because and you really touched upon a lot there, but first and foremost, I want to say that yes, and I do appreciate it and always have appreciated it. And I think that by making this public, I guess, by putting it out there online, we're providing that for other people if they choose to allow for it. Because that was the one thing that, like, you touched on the pandemic, and it was one of the weird things was because, and Gallup did a poll a few months back where it was the average people's perception of COVID and your chance of going to the hospital, and your actual chances of going to the hospital, I believe, it was like 0.03 or 0.003. I forget what it was, but it was less than 1%. But when surveyed, I believe it was over half of I forget the percentage of Democrats, but the majority of the people polled that were Democratic that, listened to CNN and the legacy media, they thought that your chances of going to the hospital if you had COVID was over 50%. So the question being like, first of all, I didn't realize that the legacy media had that much power. I mean, but I definitely felt isolated and alone when the studies that I read were not jiving at all with what was being put forward out in the narrative. And that not only was the narrative not jiving, but everybody believed the narrative. And not only that, but they were willing to shout you down and throw shadow and sometimes hatred and vitriol at you for not touting the narrative because it was that emotional tribalism not based in reality whatsoever. And we now know that it's now like sort of an open secret, but it's for some strange reason nobody talks about it openly. It's like, no, you were wrong and you abused a lot of people and you were wrong, but that's just not discussed. And, and yeah, but now it's great. Like we're all coming out of it and we could reach out and find each other. But at the time, like the relationship with you was worth its weight in gold. And it seems like the way the screws are getting turned again, and it's going to become that level of valuable as well in the future, maybe in the near future. Yeah.
Well, and I know one of the things that we were talking about in our one of our earlier conversations specifically about this podcast idea and like really getting serious about it. And
Mhm.
we were shooting around or speaking about the fulcrum and center and balance and just uh like the absolute importance of that. And that helped me make sense because what we're trying to do, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, with this podcast on a kind of higher general level is sort of that. It's like try to bring us back from these emotional, mostly emotional, very little rational, practical, it's emotional. Bring us back from these unbelievably extremes, opposite extremes, into closer to a middle point. And we were talking, the beauty of truly what it is to be in that center point. If you're to think of it like ideologically or even philosophically, when you think of any opinion, anything over which you'd have an opinion or a thought, if you're in the center place and your goal is to sort of be able to sit in every one of those degrees around the circle and see the situation from the unique perspective that it is, without having any sort of emotional tie to any one of those, in this metaphor, 360 degrees, but to really be able to sit there and sit and respect without the emotion, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of how I interpreted one of the high level intentions of these conversations, is to sort of get us back to, yes, talking about all the sides, but talking about it from this place in the middle where it's all equal.
Well, yeah, exactly what you're talking about. But yes, everything you said, yes. But I would say, what's the goal? Because everybody, you have emotions are okay. Emotions, everyone has emotions, and it's okay for emotions to even run hot. That's fine. But the question is, what's the goal? And what I said were the emotional agenda and emotional tribalism is the goal was to have them feel like the goal was either hatred or outrage or fear, and that was the goal. The goal was a solution. Like nowhere you could listen to somebody go on for an hours, and nowhere in there was a solution. They're just perpetuating fear or outrage, and that was what really stuck me as well, is because I was always trying to be like, well, no, look, I have this data. And I won't get into it whatsoever. I had like a whole bunch of ideas on what I thought we should be doing at the time that nobody was even interested in. And I remember that as well. And I went up at one point, I dug up the, the testing that ANSI performed on different fabrics used in masks and how effective they were at viruses. We didn't wait to COVID before we tested this. We knew the efficacy of different materials for viruses in face masks. That information was public and readily available, and ANSI does all of that testing. And I know about it from my job, so I got it, and I couldn't show people. Nobody was interested in the actual data. And that was one of the things that first convinced me, and I started to get nervous at that point. Like I'll put it this way, like I always knew this point was coming because the way the system responds to every crisis is to increase spending and increase regulatory authority. That's what they want, is more money and more power every single time. So always knew there would come a point where it would be a clear division between sort of like us and them being the ownership class, and then us being everybody else. And what I didn't expect though is like the guy behind me in line being like, wow, isn't it great that they're giving us a shower after that long train ride? Like, what do you mean that's not a shower? Like, of course it is. What are you, conspiracy theorists? It's like, dude, what shower has smoke coming out the top of the building? You notice how nobody's coming out the back of this place? Like, shut up, it's a shower, conspiracy, like, it got weird in my mind at least. So yeah, that's what. And so what I would like to do with the podcast. I'm sorry, that was a long way of answering the question, but I think building community, even if it's online community, is what's most important. And I say this because at the time, a friend of mine owned property in Ocala, Florida. They didn't even know COVID happened. They had enough property out there. The community stayed strong. Didn't affect anybody's life whatsoever because they had community. The rest of us that were isolated and individualized, it affected us greatly. It completely disrupted our day-to-day life. With them, wouldn't even know it happened if somebody hadn't told them. So
Yeah,
community, I believe, is
yeah,
is the
yeah,
purpose, is the goal. Is the goal is to have the opportunity to form an online community, I believe. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I think with regards to just our current state of things, I'll come back to this quotation time and time and time again, because I just don't think anything is more apropos. But Albert Einstein said, you cannot solve problems from the same level of consciousness that created them. You
Mm,
must see the world anew. So I continue to I don't understand. I don't understand why anybody that has the eyes to see and the ears to hear the bigger picture of the past 3 years, I'm confused why any of them would still have any faith in our current system of, like, the whole political thing that's getting ready to ramp up again, yet another election thing, like all of that. And I mean, the more rational part of me that has to be realistic about where the here, like what the here looks like, we're not ready as a collective yet to live as a responsible, accountable, where everybody's responsible and accountable for their whole lives. And that's what I adamantly believe in, and that's the bar for humanity. I don't feel like it's that high of a bar to set, to ask each human to learn to be personally responsible and accountable for their lives, and not to play victims and to be identified with this organization or that organization or this victimhood or that victimhood, and then be taken care of by a government that really is just using, like, it doesn't make sense. So I know we can't just swap it out and be done overnight, but at the same time, it's it to me, it all comes down to energy, and there's such an exorbitant amount of energy spent in all sorts of ways, whether you're talking financially or with our attention. And I'd make the argument that our attention is greater than any currency right now. It's what we're
yeah.
giving our attention to. And we're getting ready to hit another election cycle. And it was, we also kind of played around with, like, fake presidency, satirical presidency. Like, maybe that's what we should make it. We'll make the podcast a satirical dual presidency. We're running for
Oh,
president of, like, and just fucking totally, like, seriously, like, just, and we're going to defy it so much that you're not even voting for one person, it's for two, and you don't even vote with the bat. Like, just fucking make it up, you know?
can I be your vice president? We could switch off every other week.
We switch off every other week. That's perfect. That's perfect. That's perfect. And we tag team, we tag team. Oh, this you've really got me. You got to come in now. Yeah. Like
WWF.
completely, like completely go
And
about
she's
it.
being held down by the super PACs, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, here he comes off the top rail. Ah! Oh, yeah, I do
I
it.
think it could be,
I would totally armbar somebody for you from Allison. I totally would.
that'd be great.
I would,
That'd be great.
I would suplex a lobbyist,
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, I
No, I
absolutely would.
mean, but we joke about it, but it's actually possibly one of the only ways you'd be able to speak in a language that people can understand. And like I've always said, why do politicians raise monies? Like, you should raise money that will actually go to a real project when you're elected. Hey, when I'm elected, I'm gonna raise money, and all the money that I'm raising is going to this project. If you want to dedicate to this project or donate to my campaign, you're helping to donate to what we're going to actually do, instead of all this money just going, because there's no accountability even with the leaders. They're not held
Well,
accountable.
you bring up a good point, and I say, like, we go ahead and get started on this where to from here. Right now, we might as well do this as like a dry run, like a trial run, as far as we'll take this problem right now with the unaccountability of our leaders. So, so So where we are right now is we have a system in which the investment class, I call them the ownership class, are the ones that play game. It is their game because we have super PACs, we have dark money. So anybody worldwide, because a super PAC is a 501c4, that legislation was changed during Newt Gingrich's time. But they changed the legislation on purpose to create for the creation of a 501c4 so that they didn't have to disclose who their donors were automatically, which means they can receive their donations can come from wherever around the world. And it really opened up the ball field. And after that happened, we saw an explosion in funding of elections. I think the last election was funded to the tune of $14 billion with a B. And it's only projected to go upwards because it's now open to anybody in the world that has money and wishes to buy in US foreign policy. So they're basically selling regulatory authority. And the way it is right now is they're selling, both parties are doing this. They're selling regulatory authority and they're selling it to the highest bidder. And well, how do we stop that? Well, obviously we can't play ball on the federal level. That's too big. The only place we can actually, the only power that we have is power in numbers. And that that's the only part. We don't have power in the court system, the military, the police, the National Guard. We don't politically, we don't have power in any other way except for powers in numbers. And the only place where we can really make that power in numbers felt is on a city level. So we would have to start city by city organizing, getting campaign funding out of all elections, no in-kind donations, no direct donations, just they would get a stipend from the government, from their tax coffers every term to run. And we would then have to open up to where independent candidates could run a lot easier. And you could do that in your city. And this is where people hesitate, where you say, like, you can't get people interested, you can't get them talking about what it is, because everybody knows intuitively, on an intuitive level, that if you push, you can't fight City Hall. If you push power, power pushes back. And this is the way of it. This is the way that our system is a self-healing system designed to funnel power and money to the top. And if you're going to go to try to change that system, power can only be met with power. And I have ideas about how that could happen, but we'll talk about that but that's the there. So we identify the there. I believe the there is a system in which money is kept out of politics entirely. And that way we actually could run an honest person who wouldn't have a snowball's chance in hell right now. But that would be the only way. That's the there that I would like to go to. What about you? What do you think that there would look like?
It's a little trickier for me because I've just the greater part of me, if I'm personally being honest, the greater part of me, it's just the current system has just turned me off to such a degree that I feel like my there would be a lot further from what it currently looks like. But before I even try to explain that, which I don't know that I'll even give it
Do
a
I get to suplex somebody?
huh?
Do I get to suplex somebody and you're there in your version of there?
We can
Pile
arrange
driver?
we can
Okay.
arrange that. We can arrange that. But I was gonna say, for a short minute, I was a social studies teacher in middle school social studies.
Oh
And
yeah.
when I took I had to get certified in the state of Florida to teach secondary social science education. And I'm going to tell you, in the process of studying for that test, I learned something that I didn't know, but it doesn't seem like it takes that much of a, rocket scientist to figure this out. Our founding fathers never intended for politics to be a career. They never
Yeah, no,
intended
never. Yeah,
for it to be a career. It was
absolutely not.
they could see the inherent conflict of interest that has now taken over the entire. I mean, the fox is in the hen house. The fox is running the hen house.
Do we
It's
even have any hens left?
I was just gonna say, I don't even think there's any hens left. There's
We
so
call
many. There's so many foxes. Fox. I don't know what foxes. What's the
fox eye.
fox eye?
We basically all we got is just feathers laying around. That's
That's
pretty
right.
much
There's
done.
just a shit ton of feathers here and a lot of furriness. So, I just don't know. To me, it feels like anything. Again, that Einstein quote is always in the back of my head. I'm kind of like trying to solve problems from the same level. It all that kind of feels like the same level to me. So for me, I don't know. I would imagine just first and foremost, what I do align with your there is the highly localized nature of it. it needs to be localized. I don't know what the federal government, because any wars that they say we're claiming borders is all set up by them anyway. Like the elite ownership class are the ones going around the globe initiating and doing, anything we need protection, or we're made to believe we need protection from, is a problem they're creating, rest assured.
Yeah,
So it's like,
absolutely.
so I kind of imagine, I don't know. I don't know. For me, it's almost hard to imagine that it's not all gonna, because I kind of feel like if it all were to sort of really collapse into a place where we just have no choice but really to start from scratch, rather than trying to convince ourselves that we can even go in and go into the system and meet it even anywhere where it's at, to guide it to something higher. I can't really I personally haven't been able to imagine that. I've spent more time sort of imagining all of a sudden a frequency shift in the hearts of humans, that I almost feel like we don't need any of that. That if this shift of just love, and you hit the magic word earlier, and the suggested title of Choose Love, because
Yeah.
it does sort of come down to that. But I just feel like if humans could get out of this fear based society and this fear frequency, and all of a sudden just like get this jolt of love, we would just elevate, and we would take care of one another and take care of what needed to get done in our own communities. Because beyond that, I just don't know what does what do these high level governments even provide when you think about it.
Well, let's speak to that for a second, because I do believe in my heart of hearts that you're 100% correct, and like that's kind of like a Ken Kesey view, where his whole thing was just to drop out, like don't put any energy towards it whatsoever. If we stop, it exists on the back of our energy, and if we put no energy toward it, it would cease to exist. It's like the stock market. If nobody
Yes.
played, it would cease to exist immediately. It is only funded by the energy of the participants, and our systems that we have are the exact same way. And I remember because when I was a kid, I was trying to figure out like a solution to all these problems that we're talking about now. And I realized that the kind of people it would take to create those solutions were the kind of people that wouldn't have allowed the problem to exist in the first place. So
That's
that goes into your Einstein quote, because it's very much true, and that is the exact same thing. But the name of the show is Where to From Here, and then how to get there. And so what you're talking about, yeah, it's definitely that is an internal process that would work. And the problem is we have, and I think you're right, at a fundamental level, the problem is that we have trauma on like a societal level. Like society definitely has trauma. And what I consider, and everybody, the 3D, we take our licks. We always get the body blows. And when it becomes trauma is when it's enough, is whenever we have a body blow. And for whatever reason, we feel inadequate to meet the challenge. Like we feel like powerless. It makes us feel powerless. And that sense of powerlessness creates a sense of fear. And then that's what creates the trauma response. And then we create two things happen after we have that trauma response when it shifts us from love and into fear, when we feel inadequate for the damage that's being done to us. So the two things that happen is one, we form a description about it. So we form an idea about, okay, what just happened to me? And the description could be anything, right or wrong, whatever we sort of come up with in our mind. They're making fun of me because I'm wearing the wrong shoes, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what has to happen. But then we decide what we need to make sure it never happens again. And it's also a fear response. And we make that decision. First, we make the description of a place of fear. Then we make the decision out of a place of fear. It's like, well, I will never wear poor clothes again. I'm going to have enough money to buy whatever I want when I grow up. And then, and then, and then fill in the blank. And then suddenly everybody wants an F-150 and all the rest. And we have an entire world running on a fear-based trauma response. And there's an entire world of people willing to sell you what you think you need in order to feel powerful again. When really all we have to do is take our power back from that fear-based trauma response that happened when we were 8, 9, 10, whatever. And no amount of exterior anything will ever make that shift. They'll ever let us feel powerful enough to let go of the fear again. You can have whatever car you want. You can go in the water. It doesn't matter, because that's an internal response, and no external stimuli is going to create that for you. So yeah, you're definitely correct with that. I do believe. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, with that said, though, I mean, so I'll ask you, do you think that, do you think that the systems are in a place where we really can step from where they are? And or do you think it really does have to completely collapse? And or do you think no matter what you think, it's going to collapse? Like I feel like it's going, I don't see how the change because it's got so much power, the system itself, and to survive, it's got so much. And as you pointed out earlier, power needs to be met with power. And I'm just not seeing how that is going to play out without it, the end result being the current systems completely getting, there's just no recognition, where it will leave the opportunity for those that are already imagining these things. Now, some people are going to be ready to give attention to the new ways, because now there's not this distraction of this illusion, and these new systems could seemingly appear overnight when you think of how physical reality comes into play. It becomes physical and observable to us in this realm as soon as it gets that critical mass of energy, i.e. attention, i.e. enough human beings willing to see it that way and be like, oh yeah, okay, I can agree to that. When enough happens, boom, it comes into reality. And I can see how this can transition that way, because we need enough energy that isn't being distracted over here, but that won't happen until this is really collapsed to a point where it's bad for a minute.
Well, okay, yes, and like, yeah, what you're saying is entirely true, because the system is powerful, and it's powerful. It runs on our power and it runs on our fear. So yeah, every single time anybody releases that fear, accepts that they're no longer 8 years old, and basically it's a process of release. You're just letting it go, and you're letting the love that exists in all things, all around us at all times, fill that space again. It's not there because that fear and that sense of inadequacy pitched it off and we hurt, but just letting go of that, and allowing that love to fill in. And it's every single time anyone on this planet does that, it takes a little bit of power away from the system and turns it into the ability to channel in the new earth. I call it channeling the new earth because you're right. Whatever we focus upon, our focus operates not only as a magnifying glass, but also as a magnet. And whatever it's focused upon, it draws more of itself into creation.
Yeah.
So every time somebody releases fear and chooses love, that's why I like the choosing love. The system as we know it loses a little bit of power, and the new earth gains a little bit. So yeah, what you're saying, I do believe is entirely true. As far as what your question about, do I see a way of changing it from within the system? And so the my from here to there, where to from here, and the steps involved would be, the only thing that I've come up with so far is doing it the exact same way they legalize marijuana, on a city by city, county by county, state by state basis. And that's the only way, because if you were able to get a federal movement, we've seen that in the past in the 60s, they kill those people. You know what I mean? A state movement to kill those people too. So the only way you could do it is have enough fires. What the system sucks at is it sucks at nuance. It sucks at being nuanced, and it sucks at being clever. And it's like, well, it is clever, but it sucks at nuance and intricate. It's very heavy handed. And so the only way I see this happening is city by city until you get a county, and then enough counties till you get a state. And with the goal being to get money donations and in-kind donations completely out of politics, running on a stipend, the way it was intended originally as well. And we can get into that more later if you want, just the actual nuts and bolts of it, because that was the system that we had before this whole lobbying thing came about. And lobbying is just a polite way to say bribery anyway. So how I see that happening is city by city. Now, even doing it in your city, they're going to push back with the police force. They're going to push back with power will always push back with everything that has. If you own a business in your city, you better believe City Hall will suddenly inundate you with inspector after inspector after inspector. You better believe your parking space will suddenly cost $2,000 for some unknown reason. You know what I mean? So City Hall will definitely push back. So three things would have to happen. And we can look at successful movements like this in the past to really get where those three things is how to meet power with power. The first of it, we would need the legislation written by a lawyer, and that actually already exists online. Then you would need to go to your city council. And just the legislation wouldn't be enough because, like I said, it's a self-healing system. They wouldn't allow you. They wouldn't allow the law on the ballot. They wouldn't allow people to vote on it. I have another story about this where we tried, and the city council reserved the power themselves to just simply not let something, a citizen initiative, they could just say, no, it's not going on the ballot. for no reason. Why? Because fuck you. That's why. That's really what it came down to. We had thousands of signatures to get it on the ballot, and still at the end of the day, they're like, nah, you know. So, oh yes, camera. Yep, yep. Sorry about that. Something came in. And so three things would have to happen to make this happen. First, you'd have to have the legislation, you'd have to have the legal assets. Second, you would have to have the civil disobedience. Because the only reason why we stopped the war in Vietnam, because people were making money hand over fist, was because the civil disobedience had reached such a level that they could not be ignored anymore. So you'd have to have sit-ins in city buildings where they just refused to leave and were willing to take arrests. The problem with that, though, is that since you're threatening true power, right? So you're not just ending a war, trying to get people the right to vote or something like that. The money, when you're threatening the money, you're threatening true power. So if ever there was a time where they would try to use domestic terrorism laws against you, this would be it. They wouldn't threaten people with just misdemeanors. They threaten you with a misdemeanor at first, misdemeanor civil disobedience. But if it started to gain traction, you better believe you would start facing some felony charges. So the third thing the only other power we have in the court system is the jury. So prohibition ended because there wasn't a single jury that would convict somebody. The cops could have your picture in front of the keg, holding onto it like it's your best friend in the world, holding a sign saying, I smuggled this into New Jersey. And every single jury would still be like, not guilty. And the court system became impotent. And the smuggling continued and continued because nobody would find them guilty because the public was against it. So you would need those three things. You would need the legislation, you would need people willing to do the civil disobedience, and then you would need enough of a community support to where when they did start charging you with the domestic terrorism, which they would, you would start catching felony charges for this. And the more powerful you became,
Are
there
you
wouldn't be a jury that.
familiar
Huh?
with any communities where those three things would be met? Because if COVID time showed me anything, there ain't a lot of people willing to take a stand for even their own damn health, let alone.
That's what I said. The one thing COVID showed me where that I wasn't expecting is the guy behind me saying like, "Isn't it great we're getting a shower after that long train
Yeah,
ride?" It's
I mean,
like
we had people walking
shower, you know.
right into experiments with their lives. Dot pyramid.
And
Right.
not only
Dot,
that,
dot
but
period.
cursing the people that didn't want to go in there.
Yeah, and so I kind of come back full circle. I don't know. I guess I mean I really appreciate. Oh yeah, sorry. Go
To,
ahead.
to
Yeah,
finish though, I
yeah.
honestly personally would say yes because COVID was an example, sure, but that was an example of the power with the power. That was actually an example of the. We now have a good gauge. The good thing about COVID is we now have a good gauge on what the current paradigm can do because they were throwing every single lever, right? So COVID was an example. They there was no lever left to them at their disposal left unthrown. So that's the most pushback they can do right there. That right now, that's the benchmark of what we have to overcome. And I do believe and I do believe that we can do this because of one thing, because everybody does it right now anyway. I believe it's a myth that we can't work together because every single person out here gets together 5 days a week for 8 hours a day and goes to a job where they work with a whole bunch of people that a lot of times they have nothing in common with. They don't agree with them at all. And they go to work for 8 hours a day to make somebody else money, right? If we can all get together for 40 hours a week for the purpose of making some owner money, where we get a side piece, then we can definitely get together for one day for our own best interest. If we can get together for 40 hours a week for somebody else's best interest, why can't we get together on the weekend for our own? Why not?
I mean that I'm in wholehearted agreement with you, but I've been shocked that in the almost 11
Hmm.
years that I've been on this conscious journey to do everything that we're talking about, I thought it was 1 year away, and I'm now 11 years in. And the number of people who may not like to, where they're at 40 hours a week, or the people that they're working with, or what they're doing, it has astounded me, that there aren't more that are doing, what we're talking about is it's kind of even there's a couple of steps in between in terms of just taking steps of working for themselves as opposed to working for an owner class. And my experience in the past decade plus has just not been that there's a lot of people out there, but I think there's a lot of people out there now across the globe. Now, so
Yeah.
now you got to talk about, so I think what it's a matter of, it's almost, and that's where it kind of gets into this multidimensional aspect of what we're talking about, because I think it's a matter of harnessing the energy and focusing the energy in a way, because I don't think it's accidental that a lot of people who are seem to be on the same page, including the willingness and readiness to act on their word,
Yeah.
are spread. I've got people in my network. It's not huge, but all over the globe. They're all over the globe. So it's like none of us are even remote. You and I represent, almost the closest. You and I are the closest of anybody in my network that speak the same language and that are in the age of our life too. Because I've got some older people in my network that are just, in their 70s. They're looking at a different world than where we are in our 40s still. And so just in terms of what they're physically able to do. But all to say, I think that's a purposeful thing, that we've sort of got the energy spread out across the globe. And then the next step is to sort of begin to build, to ignite almost the nodes across the globe. Like I kind of imagine it as like a light grid, and you've got
Mhm.
and like we're each nodes, and then there's nodes of people that are at this frequency, really seeing this vision. And I know we're just beginning to give it voice, but there that see other, it doesn't even matter, just that they see something other than here, and that's part of it too, because I think it's a matter of having other voices give voice to their version of the there, so that we find the win-wins and the overlaps in the there. And then somehow I feel like that unification then could trickle down to wherever you are locally as like a frequency again, like I feel like there's a lot going on in the unseen of the of frequency. And in the negative,
Yes.
I mean, we know it is in the negative in terms of all the, whether you're talking about the 5G and the just the energy of that. And I don't know, I feel like I just I can't wait for there to be a small group of people to begin to take action on something like that. And it begins with, I guess it just begins with more than one. So
Well, I do never underestimate the power of prayer. I firmly agree. I try to make it a daily practice to pray into the earth every single morning. And some days, yes, some days I miss, but like I try to do that as a daily thing to pray into the earth, because I do believe that is first and foremost the most important. That all, yeah, it begins there. I do. And I call it prayer because I was just raised Christian, but intention, intending, aligning, channeling spirit, whatever you want to call it, source energy, it doesn't matter. A rose band or their name, it all responds. It responds to the internal beckoning, you know what I mean, is what it is. It's not what you say, not the words that come out of your mouth. It's the feeling that comes out of the base of your spine. It's getting a little bit too woo. It's the feeling that lives at the bottom of your breath, and it's connecting you to all things simultaneously at all times. And it is operating as both a magnifying glass and a magnet, drawing in whatever it is you're focused on. And when you're centered in love and free of fear, it's bringing about your best intention. So yeah, and I say we do both. Your 5D perspective, because the more people that aren't feeding fear into the system, the less powerful it becomes, and the more people we have that would say, I don't know, like you like everybody moves to the same town. Like your idea is good. Maybe instead of trying to like turn every single town one at a time, we pick to one town and say, okay, we're all moving here and we're doing this.
yeah, man,
I do it.
I hadn't really thought of it quite like that. And that just hit that just hit a node, man. That just hit a node.
As long as I get to suplex the mayor, I will move anywhere.
Hell
That's just
yeah. Yeah. And then we like,
clothesline
and
every.
when it's like a whole different kind of, I don't even want to use the word like concrete. It's just like love is concrete. Like instead of just like it's putting the whole inverse on its head. And instead of, colonizing the British colonizing empire moving in, it's a colonizing force of love. Damn it. You're
Yep.
gonna love each
I,
other. You're gonna
I definitely say choose love unless you get the chance to put a lobbyist in the figure four. If you get a chance, like I just, for 2.5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. But after that, then choose, let them up and choose love after that. But like, if given the rare opportunity to clothesline a lobbyist, You got to take it. Sometimes it's just better to ask forgiveness than permission. I think.
Yes,
So,
yes. I like that idea. I really think that's I think that's it's I don't know, there's something that really hit with that. And because I hadn't really thought of it quite like that
I
in that
legit
way.
would like if somebody that got the notice saying, "Hey, we're all going to Mayaca and we're going to overturn the city council," I would move to Mayaca. I
Yeah,
totally would.
yeah,
Why not? Why not? It would be fun.
yeah,
I would enjoy
yeah.
it. I'd go ahead and get a lawyer on retainer and I'd move to Mayaca. It'd be great.
I
That'd
don't
be
know.
awesome.
I just think it's just so darn interesting because I think it wouldn't take much peeling back of the layers to realize awake, aware, asleep, normie, whatever labels we are putting on one another, we all want the same damn things, and
Yeah.
right now I just think connection, I mean, people want to feel connected. They just want to like I don't know. Maybe it's just me, and that is still a really deep yearning within me because I'd be lying if I said the vast majority of my life it's still pretty solo. And when I'm connecting, I'm mostly connecting with myself, which is okay. But like deep connection, like creation, like honest co-creation, and taking our creative, our God-given, source-given, universe, cosmos given power to co-create with divine, to take that for a spin with others. Like that's all I want to do, is really not settle for this extremely and getting more constricted by the day reality to do that within. Like it's so
Absolutely.
constricting.
Yeah.
And I just want to like, it doesn't matter how small the task is. Can we just come together as a little group to try to unify on a vision, all agree to whatever part we're going to play for this little project and come together and create? It's just, and that's what all of life can be. And really the world is beckoning us to recreate all of it from a different foundation anyway, because it's all going to
Yes.
need to be recreated from love, because a world of love looks very different than a world of fear. So everything needs to be recreated, co-created. Actually, you can make an argument that it just needs to be remembered, right?
Yeah.
Because it's already been in anything that's ever been in existence. Anything that's ever going to be in existence is all. It's all now. Everything, everywhere, all at once. It's here now.
Yes. Oh, I would give just one caveat to just one of the things you said. First of all, I do agree. Yeah, where two or more are gathered, it says it. And I know just personally, I call it prayer, but like I said, when praying with other people, intending with other people, when you're on the same page, or rather when you're just vibrating at the same frequency, it's an exponent. It's to the power of. It's
Yes.
not like 1 + 1 = 2. It's like 2 × 2.
Yes.
Actually, that's not even a good. No, I'm sorry, 3 × 3 would be better because 1 and 2. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's a multiplier. It's to the power of, and it
Yes.
gets exponentially larger, the more people that you get. And that absolutely is true with the power of prayer. And that's why I do believe community is so good. And the saying that I have is that the 5D always makes the 3D obsolete, you know? And so I find that with the 5D perspective. The 5D perspective always makes the 3D obsolete. And we find that and it's so much simpler. It requires so much less energy. The example I use for people that haven't thought this way before is like the difference between self-respect and self-importance. They both look the same for a distance, but self-respect is owned. It doesn't need to be maintained. You have it while you're washing the dishes. It doesn't require the other. A 5D is anything that does not require the other, like you were talking about with your channeling, your praying. You can do that alone in your house. It doesn't require another. That's 5D. 3D requires the other and always needs the other. And then there's all the energy that has to go in maintaining that. Whereas 5D is owned and it's effortless and it flows naturally. And it's actually a freeing experience. You have more energy when you operate from the 5D than the 3D. But the one caveat that I said that I would have with yours as well is that, and you didn't say this, but where people automatically jump to sometimes is that it's almost like we all have to be in agreement. And I would say no, like that's not true at all. We don't all have to be in agreement about anything. In your community, there's going to be loads of people that don't agree with you. And we need to stop using that as a benchmark for things, I believe, because it's not necessary. The 5D perspective doesn't require us all to agree on the same thing. Doesn't care, couldn't care less, enjoys the diversity.
Yeah,
enjoys the opinions, enjoys the conversation, enjoys the sharing. That's part of the relationship. 5D is about relationships. That's part of the relationship, and it's accepting. A relationship can see 5D is seeing everything in terms of a relationship. And a relationship can never be, it's not right or wrong. There's no such
right.
thing as having a wrong relationship. It's just the depth and it's the depths of the relationship. It's whether it's a positive relationship, it's the depth and the benefit of the relationship is what makes a relationship a relationship. And we have a relationship with all things, beginning first and foremost with our creator, everything you were talking about, and then by everything else moving outward. And so it's not, you can't never do it right. There's no finding the right people. There's no such thing as the right people. That's a 3D way of saying it's not true. All the 3D thoughts that we have, a lot of them are just not true. And we waste all of our energy trying to make them true. And they're either just not true to begin with, or they're an impossibility. And we waste all of our energy chasing them down through the rest of our lives. So that would be the caveat that I would make. And the other thing would be, is that successful movements usually have one very simple message that everybody can get behind. So my message would be lobbying is bribery. End the lobby system. Everyone can agree to it. Lobbying is just for the people that can afford it, which it ain't us. When the elections cost $14 billion, it's not us, you know, and so end the lobby system. Everybody can agree to it. And that's where Occupy went wrong. For an example, Occupy, like I went to Occupy Orlando and everybody had a different message. So we would all have to, one thing we would have to agree on is that we're only doing this one message. The lady carrying the sign about the feral cats, go start your own thing. I mean, nobody mentions feral cats. We're here to petition, to protest lobbying. And so as long as we can agree to that, that's the only thing we have to agree to. You're right. We do all have to agree to something, but only that one thing. We don't have to agree to anything. We only have to agree to one thing, and then
Yeah,
we can make it happen. And then we can
yeah.
make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Although it's funny because as you were just talking about how the 5D, the way you see it in I see it the same way because it's accurate. It's a greater truth that the 5D makes the 3D irrelevant. It's
Yeah.
I kind of come back as you were talking, I was like thinking of what we've specifically spoken about today, which is as it pertains to sort of the political system and where and I come back in my head and I'm like, and I still can't, I'm like, yeah, the 5D makes the 3D irrelevant. So let's just give all of our energy to the 5D version of it. And then it becomes irrelevant. Like it's such a
That's
it
the goal. I mean,
it,
that's the goal.
it's kind of how I've been living my life the past 11 years. Like I've had, it's not even, I don't even want to call it, I mean, I guess it's a 5D vision for my life when I say that it's based on abundance, cooperation, and love instead of lack, competition, and fear. So I guess in that regard, but it's like I've had the vision and held the vision, and it really hasn't, like, because it's a big vision and I tried to go to the very tip of it so that like if I get that, everything else is fall in place. Not that it's an endpoint, but that's a whole nother thing. But it's also making the best of the 3D as I journey it and doing the best to kind of get through the 3D so that it becomes relevant as quickly as possible. So I can be in this, again, it's not exactly accurate terminology, but living in my dream version of my life versus the version I still have to settle for to pay my bills. It's not the dream. It's not the dream version. I'm still doing work that's not really of my heart and soul. I don't mind it. It could be worse. That's kind of how I see like the political thing. It's like, but I'm giving the most attention in my intentions and in my imagination when I think about what that change looks like. That energy is going to this version. And then it's like, then I go deal with this when I have to and bring as much of this as I can to it. I'm not doing a good job of
Well,
speaking it. It's just I
you,
still feel like it's so hard to imagine being able to change, especially that political beast from, I guess I feel like it's the to me, and again, this is just my way of seeing it. It's like the energy efficiency is, let's just focus all the attention on this so that this becomes irrelevant, so that
oh
becomes
yeah.
irrelevant. But again, we're still here. We're still having to deal with the 3D. So
Well, welcome to the human race. Yeah,
yeah,
we're all doing that. Every single person out here, doesn't matter what they're doing right now. We're all doing the exact same thing, and I think that we're all trying to feel as good as we can while we're working towards becoming the person that's capable of doing what we currently believe is impossible. more or less. And we all have our idea of that. We all have our idea of heaven. We all have our idea of what we wish we could do but can't. And so we're all in that exact same boat. We're all trying, we're just right now in this moment trying to feel as good as we can while we're trying to become the person that's capable of doing what we currently believe is impossible. That's really what I believe what we're all trying to do here. And and yeah, and I do believe everything that you said is true, that the 5D does make the 3D irrelevant. And like jump back to the example I used first, like self-respect versus self-importance, um, self-respect you. Oh, and it's easy. It rewards you. It makes you feel more empowered. It's there with you no matter whatever trial is involved. It never fails you. So it actually adds to your energy instead of taking away from it. Self-importance requires it both will make you stand up for yourself. So yes, they'll both get the job done, but self-importance must be maintained and it has a heavy price. And it always requires the other. So you're always in a state of feeling either superior or put upon, superior or less than. So you're just trying to feel one and not the other. Whereas self-importance is just on, or self-respect is just on all the time channeling goodness because it's a place of love and not fear. So that's a very good example of what I think is like 5D versus 3D. They both get the job done. 3D gets the job done. Look around you. It's built this world. 3D's built this world. But at what cost? And that's really what we're starting to analyze, I believe, for the first time now. But at what cost? And can we do better? And the answer is yes, for sure.
Yeah, and I do think, like, just as a little caveat, when you were saying that we're all doing the best we can to be the best people that we can to try to do what we perceive to be impossible. And I would kind of add a caveat that I think therein lies kind of a crucial piece. It's in that you have to believe that whatever you're doing is possible, or you're blocking the possibility of it being possible. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like,
Yeah, it makes perfect
it's
sense. Yeah.
it's it's. I'm not saying that it's. I mean, I can't personally, well, because I don't. It's like I kind of turned off the energy field to trying to figure out how to fix it from within, because it just seemed like it's way more efficient and effective and more enjoyable for me personally. That's why I turned politics off, because it was
Mm,
so frustrating to see how divisive it all was, and to feel powerless within it. And then when I had my awakening, it almost became, it was like I never even had to think about it. It was like, why would I ever give that? I want to give all my attention to being the change that I know is possible. I
yeah,
know a different world is possible. I know it in a way that I'll never be able to prove in the 3D. I know it in the truest sense of the word of, I mean, that's what I feel like an awakening is. It's like this
sure.
knowingness in your heart. And that's a game changer. Not to put down, not to say that people aren't working hard and trying to be the best and approaching their lives, but until I had my awakening and remembered there was another option, it was a
Yeah,
game changer. Game changer, because now I knew I didn't have to settle for this horseshit that is so clearly broken in so many different ways and has shown us time and time again in every segment of society. It clearly, why would I continue to give any of, if I'm giving that even a little bit of energy, I'm taking that energy away from trying to be and co-create that change. So I would say that that's the only word I would change is you got to believe it's possible, because it absolutely is. And that we need more people to remember they don't have to settle for their 40-hour week job working for the man with people they don't like, doing work they don't like, if they don't want to. If they like
yeah,
it, more power to you. If you have found a gig that you actually like, oh my God, like, I don't want to take that away from anybody. Have at it. And I personally know quite a few people in my other world that really like what they do, and that's fantastic. Me, that wasn't my cup of tea. And I know I don't
mhm,
have to settle for it. But making something and knowing we have the power to really create anything we can imagine. Another favorite quote, Pablo Picasso: everything you imagine, anything you can imagine. I think it's everything, not anything. Everything you can imagine is real. If you can
yeah.
imagine it, it's real in some realm. Like is just being able to wrap your imagination. So I don't know. I think we're on an hour, aren't we? We're about an
Yeah,
hour
and my,
in.
my my phone's beeping at me, so I think it's trying to tell me my battery's low. So let's let's bring it all back to center. First of all, this is why I love talking to you, because obviously the one thing though is you really have to stop self-censoring. You know, you hold back. I'm joking. I'm joking. Like, da, 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 da. It's awesome. I love it when you get worked up. But so to bring it all back to center for anybody that's watching this, I would say that the end of the story is that regardless of whether you're choosing my there, your there, or I guess everybody would have their own person. First, you have to decide where you're going to go. Then you have to decide that it's possible for you. If you don't believe that it's possible for you, then obviously, in my opinion, you're having a fear-based response, probably as a result of a time earlier in your life where you felt inadequate or incapable of something, that there was some sort of traumatic event that you didn't feel like you were capable of living up to or making right, and that left a mark upon you and has created a state of fear in which you're acting from, where you made a description of the world and then a decision about what you had to be to avoid it happening again. But then as soon as that became part of your energy, that you were doomed to repeating it until you were able to let go of that fear and choose love again. So if decide where you want to go, try to imagine a path that would make you feel happy, content, and fulfilled, not one in which they can't get you, not one in which you've ran away, not one in which you're safe, one that makes you feel happy, content, and fulfilled, a place where you don't need to feel safe because you're having too good of a time to even care, you know? And if you can't imagine that, decide what descriptions and what decisions you made, and then what was the thing that made you afraid to begin with, and try letting and surrender it to God, let it go to source, surrender it to love, the earth, whatever. It wants to take that back and wants to re-enter that space with the feeling of love and connection and relationship.
Well, I can't say anything more than that. That's a perfect way,
Oh,
I think that's a perfect way to conclude
okay.
episode prequel,
Prequel one.
prequel one of Where to From Here, or maybe something different. I don't know, but
A New Hope.
I think that's a perfect way to conclude it. And we went around, but I think we kind of stayed in the vicinity. I think this is an excellent first little day journey.
That's true. Normally we're much more rambling and circuitous.
Yeah,
This is very true. Yeah, this was very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for calling
yeah.
me. I appreciate it. It's always
No,
good talking to you.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Especially because there's that last bit that hit my personal situation. I'm gonna like have to re-listen to that actually with regards,
Okay.
so yeah, like decide where you want to go, make the best plan, on a more literal sense of where I'm at. But yeah, well listen, we'll see what comes of this and how we assemble it and where we put it out there, and then we'll determine when we do it again.
Okay. Yeah, much love. Throw it up on Facebook if you want, even if it's just shared only with me so I could download it too. Because I wasn't able to get the record function here
Yeah,
to
no,
work. So
I'll put it up on YouTube as put it up there on private first so you can view it, and then I'll maybe add like a title screen or something, and
oh, you could do it public. I was thinking just for you. If you want to do public, I'm totally fine. I
okay,
don't care. I just want to be able to download it. That's
yeah,
all.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
keep all these things on a hard drive.
Yeah, I need to get a new hard drive, speaking of which. Thank you for that
Okay.
reminder. Okay. Well, good
All
episode.
right.
And hang on. Don't hang up yet. I'm gonna hit stop record. So hang on one sec.